welcome to my 517 Follow Friday series. Today, I am talking with Sarah Schafer from Farmers Insurance Agency here in Lansing. Sarah provides coverage for your auto, home, business, and more. Sarah and her team really strive to educate the community on their insurance needs and serve as a voice for their clients and loved ones in a time of need. Sarah, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So let's start with your background a little bit. I would love to just hear about your journey to the insurance world.
I started in insurance almost 22 years ago, probably more, like 23 now, but and I graduated from Michigan State and didn't want to go to school anymore. And I took a job out of college in insurance, and basically I never left. I was an insurance adjuster in pretty much all lines of insurance. I have adjusted claims pretty much all over. Michigan, I was also in Northwest Arkansas. I've been a work comp adjuster as well. I basically, I have years of experience and a lot of learning. And I love insurance. I'm very passionate about it, and I like to just teach people about it. So,
Do you feel like you're enjoying this side of things more than the adjusting side that you did?
yes, I do. It's different. So you usually see people after they've had a loss. Whereas I'm hoping that if people do have a loss now that, and not that they weren't prepared, but I want to make sure that they're educated on choices and they make the choices, and that if they do have a loss, they are prepared. And then two, if they do have a loss, I can try and help them through it with the claims department as well. So,
Okay. Now, were you with Farmers before as an adjuster, or was there something specific that drew you to Farmers Insurance?
no, I wasn't with Farmers. Farmers is owned by Zurich, and Zurich is a huge insurance company. And so Zurich's basically when I was adjusting in the industry, they were always a competitor. And so I had just heard a lot of good things about them, and I heard a lot of good things from other claim reps just in the industry and how Farmers pays claims. And so claims, since it's near and dear to my heart, that's why I chose Farmers. So
Good to know. Okay. So I was hoping we could talk a little bit about the nuances of policies and just how to understand what the different parts of coverage mean. Because like you said, you really want to make sure that clients are educated about the coverage they have. I think that most people understand what a deductible is because, you've got it in different areas of your life. And then when it comes to auto policies, what is important for people to know and understand about their coverage beyond the deductible?
first of all, a couple things. I think the state requires you, first of all, to have the bodily injury and the property damage coverage and limits. And in Michigan, PIP. PIP is I think probably the most confusing part of insurance for a lot of people. Nobody realizes it and nobody understands it. So I think it's important for people to understand what their coverage is, what is required by law. When someone says full coverage versus PLPD, knowing what full coverage is, knowing what replacement cost is. There's just a bunch of terms. And so, if they're saying I have full coverage, do you really know what full coverage is? And do you have the proper limits for whatever your life is or lifestyle is? And then also knowing what is PIP? What is it going to cover? Why is it so expensive? And making a proper choice as to whether you need it or not. And so I think that that is PIP especially is one of the most important things in an auto insurance policy in Michigan, at least.
Okay. Now, when it comes to the different limits that you can have, you kind of mentioned like maybe lifestyle. Are there certain things that you ask clients about as far as their how they drive their vehicles that might indicate they should have higher limits or lower
So like,
limits?
yeah, so like where they're driving, how much they're driving, as far as bodily injury, if you have assets to that someone can take from you, then we want to analyze the coverages. So basically, if you're barely driving, you have one car, you're on a lower income, and we need to be able to get you the proper limits that you can have and that you for the amount you're driving, so we look at age and children and all of that. So I mean, everybody has a different story and so we try to analyze each person's coverage by their lifestyle, their driving habits, and what they need for them. So,
Okay. I just thought of this. Do you guys offer gap coverage for, do you know what I'm
no,
talking about? Okay, you don't.
yep,
Because I feel like
no,
it's always offered either by the credit union or the bank, and it's really to
yep,
protect them, but I just wasn't sure if you can get that independently.
no, and some companies may. So we don't. We have something like for the newer cars, there's like a newer replacement cost coverage
Okay.
endorsement that you can get on new cars, but no, typically you don't see that as much anymore. At least I personally haven't seen where, the people are needing it. We don't get asked for it a lot.
Okay. So we talked about auto. Let's talk about homeowners insurance a little bit. Are there any nuances that you can share about those types of policies that you typically, if you're going to review someone's policy to make sure they've got sufficient coverage, what are some of the things that you look for?
So number one is insurable interest. So is your name on the deed? Like who is in the home? So sometimes you see, especially nowadays, let's say insurance policy is in Sue Smith's name. I'm just saying I'm using a random name. I don't even
Right.
know that person. Um, and then she has or somebody else that lives with her, right? That's a significant other, but they're not married. But that significant other isn't listed on the policy. So unfortunately, if that significant other is not listed on the policy, and your house burns down, that significant other, if they don't have renter's coverage, could have no coverage for anything.
Right.
As far as insurable interest, sometimes, if like mom, dad died or something in a house was left, names haven't changed, people don't realize that. So insurable interest is number one. Then, two is the common things that I see is, other structures. When I say another structure, something that isn't attached to your house, do you have enough coverage for that?
Mhm.
That I have seen before where someone builds a pole barn, let's say, maybe you built a pole barn and you didn't tell your insurance agent, and now you
Mhm.
don't have enough coverage. It's just certain things that people just don't think about. And honestly, they probably, if I weren't in insurance, as I wouldn't think about it. So, and then another one would probably be like water and sewer backup. That's a big one that we see. A lot of people are like, what's that? What does that cover? So,
Mhm. We actually had that happen in 2008 and we did not have coverage for it. So I feel
yeah.
that
So,
pain.
yes, I understand that. So those are things that I just kind of look at right off the bat. So,
Okay. Now you mentioned like building a pole barn or other structures. What are the odds that if someone made significant remodeling improvements to their home that they should have it reanalyzed?
well, so the issue becomes that most coverage for other structures, for example, is like a flat percentage of your
Okay.
main coverage. What people don't realize is that coverage, if it's a standard percent without changing, is 10% usually. So if the consequence of not having the coverage analyzed is you could have a $50,000 pole barn with only $10,000 of coverage, and then it burns down, and then you don't have any other coverage. And when I'm saying the barn, it's the structure, not the stuff in the barn. And
Right.
that's something that's kind of confusing to people too, is when they say that, they think, oh, it's just the stuff in it too. So also people I've found that if you have like a motorcycle or you have a four-wheeler or something with wheels and it's not insured on another policy somewhere, it's not covered by a homeowner's policy. And
Right.
people don't always realize that when you're storing things in a barn
Okay.
or garage. So
Right. So,
without some exceptions, it's
okay.
not usually.
Okay. You were talking about the insurable interest when you were talking about Sue Smith or whatever your example was. You made me think of something that kind of has some correlations to the work that I do. And I'm just curious what your take is on it. So when an owner dies and the property is in their trust already, are there changes that need to be made to update that policy as the trust administration begins? And I guess the same question, if it has to go through probate and then it's going through probate administration, how does that
So
affect insurance?
the biggest thing is if the owner dies and nobody's in that house, it should
Right.
not stay as a homeowner's policy. It
Okay.
needs to get to a dwelling policy because the house is vacant. So the risk changes and the risk is different. So, because many homeowners policies have some type of vacancy exclusion because, when that homeowner applied for that application, they were living there.
Mhm.
So, that's a big thing that people don't realize is that if that house is changing the function and even though you're not renting it, like even though it's staying empty. So your
Right.
coverage can be jeopardized. So it's really, really important to make sure you contact your agent and make sure that those are being changed.
Okay. And then what about, mom and dad are living, they set up a plan with me, put their house in their trust. Is that something that needs to be reported to their agent so that their trust is like listed as an insured on the policy?
Yeah, so sometimes we then would add like we would change the name to like the John Shoe Smith Trust,
Okay.
whatever that is. So yeah, um, but we don't know. Like we don't if we don't know, we can't do the changes. So
Right.
also too, like many times, when people divorce, they forget to change or take that other spouse off of the policy. If that spouse is on the policy and we don't have documents to get them off the policy, then we would have to make checks payable to both people on the policy. So that can get a hiccup too.
Mm-hmm.
Or, so there's just little things that people, let's say they move out of one house and move into another house. Once again, there's that whole vacancy thing, like can't stay as a homeowner's policy.
Right.
And I think, I found with clients a lot of times that, when people don't have estates or different things set up and houses have kind of gone from one person to another, sometimes they just keep the insurance and the families just continue to pay and pay. What they
Right.
don't realize though is it does become, if you do have a claim, it can become a nightmare and you could maybe not have coverage. So you
Right.
want to make sure as your life's changed that is checked on, for sure. Even
Yeah.
if you're probate, you need to make sure it's checked
Right. Okay. Great. What about business policies? What do you offer for business owners?
on. Well, we have about every line of business, that you can think of. We have, so Farmers is my main company, but then as far as, if you have something that's not in our appetite, then we would go to our brokerage, which is Crab Lake. So, for instance, employer's liability, we offer work comp, contents coverage, loss of income coverage if you're a business and something happens.
Mhm.
There's a broad spectrum of coverage. And it just depends on which coverage we should have you in. So
Okay. Where do you feel like clients are lacking in coverage or even adequate coverage when you meet with them? Is there any common theme that you see?
the home, number one is the other structure and the water and sewer backup. Just work comp, listing your employees, making sure you're reporting your proper employees, right? One thing that I really recommend with our work comp is it bills directly. We can work with payroll companies and And to be honest, that's super important because if you report you have 2 employees and you really have 7 employees, and when you get audited, you could owe a lot more money. So there's just little things that I think, people should make sure that they have the proper coverage. For auto, I think it's the PIP, people just not understanding the coverages for PIP.
Okay. And then are there any other unique types of coverage that you offer that you want people to know about?
If you're having an event, make sure that you look at an event policy. If you're having a party that's offering some liquor and alcohol, you don't want to be responsible if someone gets, drives and gets drunk and they were at your event, then you aren't normally in the business of serving alcohol. Definitely get an event policy.
Okay.
If you're in a business, for instance, of doing something and then you're doing something, let's say you're a trash person and you're insured for trash, and then you decide that you're going to do something that's not in that duty of trash is what you're insured, and you want to host a wedding at your place, your business is not insured for weddings. It's insured for trash. So the biggest thing is to make sure that you contact your agent. If you're even planning on a one-time thing that is not in your course and scope of what your current insurance policy is, you want to make sure that you're properly covered.
I bet a lot of people miss that.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I've seen it on the back end where they didn't have the coverage. And I do think, as one other thing that I see, a lot of people don't have umbrella policies. I think the importance of an umbrella policy, especially with the PIP coverages, is important. So I think that's another piece too.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to share today?
No, anyone that, I love helping people, even if I can't beat their rate, I'd love to at least give them some education. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I will share all of your contact information in the caption for the video. And
Okay.
then if anyone's watching and they're in the market for new insurance products or just interested in a quote to compare, Sarah is really great to work with. So I think you should reach out to her. If you're interested in being featured on my 517 Fellow Friday series, you can send me an email at katrina@cornerstonelegalpllc.com. Thanks for watching.
Thanks, Katrina.